first of all, if you listen to this show, not just by the specific songs, but also just by the playlist in general, obviously, I'm a fan of the Beatles. They're, in my opinion, the greatest band of all time. And it's not necessarily an uncommon opinion, but yeah, just thought I'd reiterate that. And yeah, in general, though, like I've said, I'm not a fan of like the trend of the whole musician biopics coming out. And it's not that they're all bad. I mean, there have been good ones, but how they just seem very self-serving. How it's just a very weird trend to come up. I spoke about this a few weeks ago with the Michael Jackson movie. I think just 2 weeks ago now is when I spoke about that. So yeah, you can tell I'm not exactly always on board with the trend, but whatever. I just thought I'd speak about this one specifically. Um, so yeah, but I have thought though, even though I'm not a big fan of the trend in general, that I always thought it'd be a cool idea to do like a biopic on one, if not more than one of the Beatles, because they lived interesting lives, and I think it would be cool to see one. I think specifically on John Lennon, since I feel like he probably lived the most interesting life out of all of them, and plus, he's probably the most famous out of all of them, especially for some of his solo projects. Although, I believe there already was kind of one from about 15 or so years ago that was about his life when he was younger and like growing up, and then kind of ended with the formation of the Beatles. So I guess there already has kind of been one, but yeah, apparently though that is kind of happening because according to Variety, each of the four Beatles will be receiving their own separate biopic to be released in 2027. So yeah, the director of all four of them is Sam Mendes, who I don't know if everyone will recognize by name, but you'll definitely recognize some of his work. I mean, his work that I'm most familiar with is he directed both Skyfall and Spectre, the Bond movies, which are both movies I like. I mean, I know a lot of people didn't like Spectre, but I like both of them. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe he could do a good job. I mean, I think he's a talented director. But the other problem is Sony will be releasing the movies, which isn't exactly the best sign, just because they don't always have the best track record with movies. I mean, they made those Spider-Man movies about 10 years, those amazing Spider-Man movies about 10 years ago, which I thought were just terrible. I know there are people who like them, but and then they made all those Spider-Man spin-off movies like Venom and Morbius and all that, which just kind of speak for themselves. And I know like a movie studio has hundreds, thousands of movies maybe. So I'm not going to completely judge them based on just two of them or a few of them, but not exactly the best sign, at least as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I will say that I feel like the director, who the director is, has more say, and or at least is going to convince me more whether or not it'll be good or bad. So at least that's a good sign. But yeah, not exactly the best there. But anyway, I think that one of the bigger problems with this idea, and there aren't a lot of details out, but I just wanted to talk more about the concept of it. I mean, I did say earlier today that they were going to be shooting about mid 2025, so still over a year before they even shoot them. But yeah, the thing is that kind of bothers me with the little details we have is that, I mean, obviously the four Beatles, were very different people, especially if you're very familiar with them. You can tell the differences in like personalities and stuff like that. And I mean, I would see a biopic of any one of them. I mean, even if there was just one and it was about Ringo or something. I mean, no offense to Ringo, but I would still see him. But the idea of making four of them, especially at the same time, with I'm assuming the same creative team behind all of them. I mean, I think that's just going to create fatigue of these movies. I can't see more than like two of these being very financially successful. And I know there's like much, much more to a movie than like the success of the box office, but I mean, it's still just something to think about. I'm not saying that will make them bad, but I feel like, I mean, unless they release them like a few months apart, which would probably be a better idea. When I say this, I kind of assume they're going to be released like all on the same day or something, and they're going to kind of think it'd be cool for people to like go see one right after the other, and then the next and the next. I don't really see people doing that. I hate to say, although they could. I'm not the best predictor of what people are going to do, but I think that that's a possibility that it's just not a lot of people are going to enjoy them, or at least see all of them for that reason. But again, I could be wrong about that. But that didn't really bother me at first. But the thing that really did, because when I was thinking about it, I thought it would be a good idea. Like maybe if they do the movies like starting after the Beatles broke up or something, it could work better. Because that's when they kind of went on their separate paths. But according to Variety, and again, this could be wrong, I guess, but the films will tell the stories of the Beatles up to the breakup. So when they broke up is like the end for each of them. And really, I mean, I don't think that's a good idea because that just kind of, limits the possibilities of what you could do with it. Because, if you're going to tell the stories of, because, all of them were in their either late 20s or early 30s when the Beatles broke up. And I'm pretty sure the majority of their lives up to that point, or not the majority, but, a very large portion was in them in the Beatles. Of course, it wasn't the majority of them. Saying that after I said it and then I thought about it for a second. Of course, it wasn't the majority, but a large portion of their lives was in the Beatles. at that point. And before then, they were mostly like kids or, you know, young men in college, or the ones who started off in college before just doing the Beatles full time. So, what could really, it seems like they're not going to tell their life from birth, I doubt. So it just seems like four different perspectives of the same story. Now, what I was thinking, if they wanted to do this better, and like, I mean, here I go, like, taking this thing like I know what I'm doing, like I should be in charge of this whole thing. But I thought what might be a better idea is if each of them started with the breakup and went through the rest of their lives, and then the events of the Beatles were more like would be told in flashbacks, and they could be slightly different for like each of the movies, as if each of them saw things differently, thought of things differently. I don't know. I think that could be a better idea. That's how at least I would do it if I was put in charge of a task like this. But I guess the creatives aren't really interested in that, and I'm not saying it can't work, being the way they're going to do it with it starting with them joining the Beatles and going up to the breakup. But I just doubt that would be as good an idea. But I think this really leads to the risk of the movies just being super repetitive, which I said before, because unless they're gonna do it the idea of where, unless they do the idea where everyone kind of sees things differently, then really you're just telling the same story four different times. I mean, are they gonna reuse footage for the movies? I mean, maybe that's possible. I think what might be better if they wanted to go that approach is to make more of like a mini series about each of, where it's 4 episodes and each of them could be like an hour long. And it was, it's just their lives while they're in the Beatles, but you don't really focus on the music maybe so much. It's more about their personal lives, if that makes any sense. I think that could be more interesting. And I guess, yeah, like if it's a mini series and each episode's an hour, then like what? Okay, is that really that different from each one of them being its own movie? I guess technically not. But I think that would be better just because, assuming it was released on like a streaming service or something, you could just marathon all four of them, one right after the other. And I guess you can do that with the movies too, but I kind of feel more like with the movies, you're going to have to set dates to go see them in the theaters and all that. It just seems more of like a hassle. I don't really think it's as good an idea. But I just think the movies, they just really run the risk of just becoming repetitive, and what's really the point to even watch four of them. But it's a bit hard to even think about all this because, first of all, like I said, they haven't even started shooting yet. I mean, it's still like I think over a year before they're shooting, and then on top of that, they're not being released until 2027, and like 2027. Like I know I'm overreacting here, but is the world even still going to exist in 2027? Like I'm pretty sure if they never mention these movies again by 2027, well, I think we'll all just have forgotten this was even announced. And okay, when you think about it, it's 3 years. And 3 years ago was 2021, and if something that doesn't feel like that long ago, how long ago 2021 was. I mean, but when you look at it, exactly 3 years ago in 2021, things were pretty different than how they are now. But I mean, so different that it's like worth asking if the world will still exist. No, I guess not, because in 2021 I wasn't thinking about like what if the world's going to exist in 2024. So I guess maybe it's not such a big deal, but still it just feels like so long. I mean, by the second half of the decade, by the time where it doesn't even matter anymore, we're just a few years from it being all over. That's when these are going to come out. Like, I don't know. And the other thing that makes me think that's a bit weird is because I mean, are movies even going to be like made by humans anymore in 2027? And I know that's a bit of an exaggeration, but really, is it that much? Because AI has become so advanced that I think I predict by the end of the decade we'll have gotten to the point where, I'm not saying they'll be necessarily good, but you can just make movies on AI. You can just say like, make a movie like this with this actor in it and have these plot